Heading into November, your grocery bill is about to look a lot different. A perfect storm of rising transportation costs, weird weather, and huge holiday demand is hitting supermarket shelves hard. Basic items you buy every week, from your morning coffee and eggs to the beef and seafood you have for dinner, are set to see some major price hikes. We're breaking down exactly which products will be most affected and why. Stay tuned as we count down the top 10 items that will cost you more next month so you can shop smarter and save money. You won't want to miss this. 1. The incredible, increasingly expensive egg. Eggs are a staple in kitchens everywhere, a simple and versatile source of protein that forms the backbone of countless meals. From a quick morning scramble to the essential binding agent in holiday baking, their role is undisputed. Yet, the unassuming carton of eggs is on track to become a luxury item on your November grocery list. Several powerful factors are converging to drive prices significantly higher, and it starts with a persistent and destructive force: avian influenza. This highly contagious virus has been a recurring nightmare for poultry farmers. When an outbreak is detected, entire flocks of laying hens must be culled to prevent its spread, creating an immediate and drastic reduction in the nation's egg supply. Recovering from these losses is a slow and arduous process. It takes months to raise a new generation of hens to maturity, leaving a significant gap in production that ripples through the entire supply chain. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has been sounding the alarm, projecting that the fallout from these supply shocks will continue to push egg prices upward well into the coming year. Some market analysts are forecasting price increases anywhere from 20% to a staggering 40% compared to last year. This isn't just an abstract economic prediction, it's a tangible change that you will notice at the supermarket. That familiar dozen that was once an easy purchase might soon cause a moment of hesitation at the checkout counter. The unique market dynamics of eggs amplify these price hikes. Unlike other food items, there are very few direct substitutes for eggs. Demand remains remarkably inelastic, meaning people continue to buy them even as prices climb. They are a fundamental ingredient for families, essential for breakfast, cooking, and baking, which keeps demand consistently strong regardless of cost. November introduces another layer of pressure: the holiday season. As Thanksgiving approaches and the festive baking frenzy begins, the demand for eggs skyrockets. Cookies, cakes, pies, and custards all require a healthy supply of eggs, and this surge in consumption happens to coincide with other challenging conditions. Colder weather can naturally slow down egg production, while rising fuel costs increase the expense of transporting eggs from farms to distribution centers and finally to your local store. The cost of feeding the hens is another critical variable. When prices for corn and soy, the primary components of chicken feed, increase, those costs are inevitably passed down to consumers. Furthermore, the industry-wide shift toward cage-free and free-range systems, while a positive step for animal welfare, also contributes to the higher price tag. These systems require more space, more sophisticated infrastructure, and higher labor costs to maintain, adding a few cents to every dozen produced. While it may seem small, this incremental cost adds up significantly on a national scale, further firming up the price floor. 2. The rising cost of red meat. Beef, a centerpiece of many fall and winter meals, is poised for a significant price surge this November. The primary driver behind this trend is a classic case of tight supply struggling to meet steady demand. For several years, the national cattle herd in the United States has been contracting, reaching numbers not seen in over 7 decades. This long-term decline is the result of ranchers facing challenging economic conditions, including high feed costs and persistent drought, which forced them to liquidate parts of their herds rather than absorb mounting losses. Rebuilding a cattle herd is not a quick or simple task. The biological life cycle of cattle dictates a slow recovery. It takes years for a new calf to be born, raised, and prepared for the market. This inherent delay means that even if market conditions improve and ranchers decide to expand, the impact on beef availability won't be felt at the grocery store for a long time. Government data confirms this reality, with reports like the Consumer Price Index showing a consistent upward trend in the beef category throughout the year. Wholesale beef prices, which often predict retail trends, have also shown strength. After a brief cooling period following the summer grilling season, prices found a solid floor and began to climb again as retailers started stocking up for the fall. This indicates that buyers are anticipating a tighter market and are willing to pay more to secure their inventory ahead of the holiday rush. Weather continues to play a disruptive role. Key cattle-producing states have experienced fluctuating drought conditions, impacting the availability and quality of pasture land for grazing. When natural forage is scarce, ranchers must rely on more expensive feed, further squeezing their profit margins and sometimes leading to additional herd reductions. But it ultimately depletes the future supply pipeline, guaranteeing higher prices down the road. Adding to the domestic supply pressure are issues with imports. While the U.S. does import beef to supplement its own production, disruptions in this area can have a noticeable effect. For instance, temporary pauses on cattle imports from countries like Mexico, often due to animal health concerns, remove a crucial source of supply that typically helps balance the market, particularly in the southern states. All these factors are reflected in the futures market, where traders bet on the future price of cattle. These markets have been signaling a tight supply environment for months, with prices occasionally reaching record highs. For the average shopper, this will translate into more expensive steaks, roasts, and even ground beef. As you plan your holiday feasts and cozy winter dinners, expect to see higher price tags in the meat aisle. This doesn't mean you have to give up your favorite cuts, but it does call for smarter shopping. Buying tougher cuts for slow cooking, keeping an eye out for weekly specials, and perhaps purchasing larger roasts earlier in the month can help you manage your budget without sacrificing your menu. 3. The sugar squeeze and sweeter prices. The price of all things sweet, from granulated sugar for your baking projects to the candy that fills holiday bowls, is set to climb this November. This price pressure is the result of a powerful combination of surging seasonal demand and a tightening global supply chain. November marks the unofficial start of the high-demand season for sugar and sweets. Holiday baking kicks into high gear, and households across the country simultaneously reach for granulated sugar, brown sugar, powdered sugar, and confectionery items like chocolate and candy canes. This predictable annual surge in demand is hitting the market at a time when global supplies are facing significant uncertainty. The world's sugar supply is heavily dependent on the cane harvests in a few key exporting nations, such as Brazil and India. These crops are highly vulnerable to weather patterns. Even minor shifts in rainfall or temperature can dramatically impact yields. When a major producer experiences a less than ideal harvest and reduces its export volumes, the global commodity market reacts almost instantly, pushing up the price of raw sugar for food manufacturers everywhere. These increased costs work their way through the supply chain, eventually appearing as a higher price on the sticker at your local supermarket. The confectionery market is facing its own unique set of challenges, particularly with a core ingredient, cocoa. Key cocoa growing regions in West Africa have been battling crop diseases and unfavorable weather, leading to a volatile and expensive cocoa market. When the cost of cocoa rises, it becomes more expensive to produce chocolate. In response, candy makers often resort to shrinkflation, reducing the size of a candy bar or the number of pieces in a bag, or they are forced to implement direct price increases. If these higher raw material costs are locked in during the fall, they are passed directly to retailers, who then adjust their pricing for the crucial holiday shopping season. It's a ripple effect that starts on a farm thousands of miles away and ends in the candy aisle of your grocery store. Beyond the raw ingredients, other operational costs are also contributing to the price hike. Sugar refining is an energy-intensive process, and higher fuel and electricity costs directly increase production expenses. Transportation is another significant factor. Every bag of sugar and box of candy must be shipped from plants to warehouses and then to stores. Rising diesel prices mean that every step of this journey costs more. Even packaging materials like paper and plastic, while seemingly small expenses, add up when producing millions of units for a holiday rush. The timing of these factors makes November a particularly vulnerable month. While many large food companies negotiate their sugar contracts far in advance, they also rely on the spot market to fill any gaps in their supply. If spot prices are elevated in the early fall, those higher costs are reflected in the retail prices you see just a few weeks later. To manage your budget, consider stocking up on baking essentials like granulated sugar and cocoa powder before the holiday rush fully takes hold. These items have a long shelf life when stored properly, allowing you to buy them when you spot a good deal. 4. The rising tide in the beverage aisle. The prices for non-alcoholic beverages are set for a noticeable increase. This November, a trend that builds on momentum seen throughout the year. Official inflation data has consistently shown this category outpacing many others in the grocery store, with significant year-over-year price growth. Market forecasts for the coming year also predict continued above-average inflation for these drinks, signaling that the pressure is not a temporary issue but a sustained market condition. As we enter the holiday season, this existing upward trend is expected to accelerate. A major contributor to this is the coffee market. Weather volatility in Brazil, a dominant global producer, has created significant uncertainty. Combined with tight inventories in key exchanges and intermittent trade frictions, the cost of raw coffee beans has been firming up. Even minor supply disruptions can have a substantial impact on the prices paid by roasters and brands, who purchase beans through both long-term contracts and on the spot market. When these costs rise in the early fall, the effect typically reaches retail shelves a few weeks later, just as consumers begin switching from cold drinks to hot beverages for the colder weather. The juice section is also experiencing its own squeeze. The market for frozen concentrated orange juice saw prices soar to record highs due to persistent crop issues in key growing regions. While prices have eased slightly from their peaks, the underlying problems of disease and difficult weather have not disappeared. Processors and brands absorb these higher input costs, and that expense is now fully baked into the retail price of juice cartons and bottles. Even if the commodity market cools, the price you pay at the store can lag behind, as retailers often lock in their holiday inventory at prices negotiated when costs were at their highest. Packaging is another critical factor driving up costs across the entire beverage aisle. Aluminum cans have been impacted by new trade duties and a tight domestic supply, prompting industry calls to retain more scrap material within the country. Simultaneously, the plastic bottles used for sodas, teas, and juices rely on PET resin. Recent tariffs on imported PET have made these containers more expensive to produce. When the cost of the can or bottle goes up, that increase is almost always passed on to the final price of the product. Furthermore, the very bubbles in your carbonated drinks are becoming more expensive. Carbon dioxide, CO2, is essential for carbonation, but its supply has been inconsistent in various parts of the country this fall. Any disruption in CO2 delivery can force beverage plants to slow down production or pay a premium to secure the gas they need, adding to the per-unit cost. Layered on top of this are shipping complications, including new port fees that can create delays and add another layer of expense as products move from warehouses to store shelves. Finally, the high cost of sugar continues to ripple through the beverage industry. With a tight global sugar market, the price of this fundamental ingredient remains elevated, directly impacting the cost of sweetened teas, sports drinks, sodas, and ready-to-drink coffees. Taken together, these factors create a perfect storm in the beverage aisle. Expect to see higher prices on everything from multi-packs of soda to your morning coffee and juice, making November a month for savvy shopping and careful price comparison. 5. The fresh produce price puzzle. While the annual price average for fresh vegetables may appear stable, this broad view masks the significant month-to-month volatility that shoppers are likely to experience this November. A confluence of factors related to weather, logistics, labor is creating pressure that will inevitably push prices higher on many popular items just as holiday cooking gets underway. A large portion of America's winter vegetables comes from California and Florida, two states that have contended with erratic weather, including intense heat waves and unpredictable rainfall since the summer. Recent drought monitors indicate that dry conditions are returning to key agricultural areas, and the forecast of a La Niña weather pattern raises the risk of a drier than normal winter. This combination can lead to reduced crop yields and lower quality, squeezing the available supply right before demand surges for Thanksgiving and other festive meals. Plant diseases are another persistent threat to stable prices. Past outbreaks affecting lettuce crops in California's Salinas Valley have demonstrated how a regional problem can quickly cause prices to spike nationwide. When a pathogen damages a crop or forces an early, smaller harvest, buyers from across the country are left competing for a limited supply, driving wholesale prices up dramatically. Imports, particularly from Mexico, play a crucial role in filling the gaps in U.S. production during the colder months. Mexico has become a horticultural powerhouse, supplying a vast amount of winter produce like tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and berries to American grocery stores. While this trade relationship is a vital support for the market, it is not immune to disruption. Slowdowns at the border, rigorous plant health inspections, and other logistical hurdles can delay shipments and add to transportation costs. When these delays occur in November, Produce managers at your local store must often pay a premium to secure enough inventory to keep their displays stocked, and that extra cost is passed on to the consumer. The cost of getting produce from the farm to the store also remains a significant part of the final price. Although diesel prices have seen some relief, trucking is still a major expense for perishable goods that need to be transported quickly and over long distances. A few cents more per gallon can add up significantly for a truckload of lettuce or tomatoes shipping across the country. Furthermore, the foundational costs on the farm remain elevated. While fertilizer prices have come down from their recent historic peaks, they are still higher than pre-pandemic levels for many growers. Farm labor costs also continue to climb due to adjustments in wage rules and a competitive labor market, impacting the expense of picking and packing the vegetables. Any renewed congestion in global shipping routes, such as restrictions at the Panama Canal, can also create bottlenecks for produce arriving on the East Coast, adding more delays and costs to the system. All these threads are weaving together to create a scenario where fresh vegetables will be noticeably more expensive. This November, the price tags on everything from salad greens to holiday side dish staples will reflect the complex journey they took to get to your cart. 6. The delicate balance of dairy prices. The dairy aisle might seem like a bastion of price stability, but a closer look at the underlying market forces reveals why you should expect to pay more for butter, cheese, and other related products this November. The situation begins at the farm. According to the USDA, the price farmers receive for their milk is projected to be moderate. While not a crisis, these middling returns do not provide a strong incentive for dairy farmers to rapidly expand their herds. As a result, the overall milk supply is not expected to loosen significantly, which helps create a firm price floor for all dairy products at the retail level. The holiday calendar then adds a powerful layer of demand. As baking season and holiday entertaining kick into gear, there is a predictable surge in purchases of butter, heavy cream, specialty cheeses, and condensed milk. The wholesale price of butter, for instance, has been on a roller coaster, reaching record highs before sliding this fall. However, that recent drop doesn't immediately translate to lower prices at the supermarket. Retailers plan their promotions weeks in advance and may still be working through inventory that was purchased at a higher cost. Global market trends also exert a pull on domestic prices. While international dairy prices have softened from their mid-year peaks, they remain higher than they were a year ago. This means that U.S. importers and food brands that rely on global sources are not finding bargain prices. Key exporters are also signaling market strength. New Zealand, a major player in the global dairy trade, raised its milk price forecast for the current season, which supports its farmers but also keeps its export prices firm. In the European Union, milk deliveries and production remain solid but are not creating a surplus large enough to flood the market and drive down global prices. When international values are relatively high, it reduces the ability of imports to provide price relief in the U.S. market, especially during a high-demand period like the holidays. It's also important to address the animal health story that made headlines earlier this year. The detection of H5N1 in some U.S. dairy cattle raised public concern, but federal agencies have confirmed that pasteurization effectively inactivates the virus, ensuring the safety of milk and dairy products. The primary market effect was not related to safety but to the added friction from testing protocols and animal movement restrictions, which created minor logistical disruptions for producers and haulers. Finally, operational costs continue to add upward pressure. The cost of transportation remains a key factor, as milk and cream are perishable and require frequent timely shipping. Packaging is another area of rising expense. The plastic used for yogurt cups and milk jugs has become more costly due to new tariffs, and these sticky container costs contribute to the final price. When you combine these input costs with expenses for labor and cold storage, it becomes clear why prices are firming up. This November, expect to see the effects of this delicate balance at the checkout counter. Seasonal demand for butter and cream will be high, cheese boards will drive specialty sales, and the underlying costs of production and transportation will keep a floor under prices. To navigate this, plan ahead by watching for sales on block cheese and butter and consider stocking up when you find a good deal. 7. Why your holiday bird will cost more. As we head into November, poultry prices are poised for an upward climb, driven by a combination of cautious production, seasonal demand spikes, and persistent operational costs. While official projections suggest a modest increase in overall poultry production for the coming year, this is primarily due to lower feed costs and improved hatch rates rather than any significant expansion of farming operations. Many producers remain wary after experiencing devastating losses from avian influenza outbreaks in previous years. This caution has led to a more conservative approach, with farmers growing their flocks slowly and deliberately to mitigate the risk of disease. This careful strategy, while sensible from a business perspective, results in a tighter supply just as the market enters its period of peak demand. The Thanksgiving holiday is, of course, a massive driver of this trend, particularly for turkey. This year, turkey production is anticipated to be lower than in the recent past, leading to fewer birds in cold storage inventories ahead of the holiday rush. This scarcity is already being reflected in the wholesale market, where prices for whole turkeys have begun to rise as retailers and processors compete to secure their supply. Many major grocery chains negotiate their turkey contracts months in advance, and those agreements are being settled at higher baseline prices. This means that even when you see a promotional sale tag on a turkey in November, the final price is likely to be higher than what you paid last year, as the discount is being applied to a more expensive starting point. Finding larger birds, particularly those in the popular 16 to 20-pound range, may prove more challenging and costly. Chicken prices are also firming up after a period of relative stability over the summer. While broiler production is expected to see slight growth, wholesale prices for key chicken parts are on the rise. Processors are grappling with increased expenses for labor and packaging, and transportation costs remain elevated due to fuel prices and other logistics fees. The savings from lower feed costs are being largely offset by these other operational pressures, including the rising cost of energy needed for processing plants and cold storage. The looming threat of highly pathogenic avian influenza, HPAI, continues to add a layer of cost and uncertainty to the industry. Although there have not been widespread outbreaks recently, the virus remains present in wild bird populations, forcing producers to invest heavily in biosecurity measures, monitoring, and in some cases, vaccination programs. These essential safety protocols add to the cost of production, which is ultimately reflected in the retail price. Furthermore, farms that were hit by outbreaks earlier are still in the process of rebuilding their flocks, which curtails the current market supply. Global trade dynamics also play a significant role. The United States is a major exporter of poultry, and strong demand from international markets like Mexico and parts of Asia helps keep the domestic supply tight. When both export demand and domestic holiday consumption surge simultaneously, the entire supply chain is stretched thin. All these factors combined create a clear picture. You can expect to pay more for chicken, turkey, and other poultry products this November. 8. The hidden costs in your pantry. The center aisles of the grocery store, home to processed foods and pantry staples, may seem like a refuge from price volatility, but they are subject to a complex web of cost pressures that are set to culminate in higher prices this November. The price you pay for items like cookies, cereals, crackers, pasta, and canned goods is a direct reflection of the costs accumulating throughout the entire production chain. The journey begins with the core ingredients. When the market prices for agricultural commodities like sugar, wheat, corn, cocoa, and vegetable oils trend higher, it directly impacts the manufacturing cost of a vast range of products. Even a fractional increase in the price of a key ingredient can be enough to push a finished product into a higher price bracket. While large food companies use long-term contracts to hedge against some of this volatility, many still need to purchase ingredients on the spot market to meet production demands. If those spot prices are firm in the fall, consumers will feel the effect when holiday-themed products and promotional displays hit the shelves. The second major cost driver is packaging. The price of cans, cartons, glass jars, and plastic films has remained elevated compared to pre-pandemic levels. The markets for aluminum and steel are influenced by energy costs and international trade policies. The cost of paper and cardboard fluctuates with fiber prices and mill capacity, while the price of plastics is tied to the oil market and recycling policies. Each of these inputs adds a small amount to the cost of a single unit, but when multiplied across millions of items produced for the holiday season, these pennies add up to a noticeable increase at the checkout. Transportation and storage represent another significant layer of expense. Processed foods often travel long distances and spend considerable time in warehouses. Fluctuations in diesel prices directly affect trucking costs, while port congestion and fees can introduce delays and force companies to pay for premium shipping or additional storage. For items that require refrigeration, such as canned doughs or prepared meals, The rising cost of energy for cold storage and refrigerated transport adds yet another layer to the final price. Labor costs also remain a persistent factor. Many food processing facilities are still paying higher wages to attract and retain staff in a competitive market. Furthermore, implementing and maintaining safety protocols can add time and expense to production runs. When a plant is operating at full capacity, any slowdown can reduce overall output and increase the cost per unit. This pressure can manifest as straightforward price increases or as shrinkflation, where the size or quantity of the product is reduced while the price remains the same. Finally, retail timing plays a role. Grocery stores plan their holiday promotions weeks or even months in advance. If manufacturers present them with higher list prices during this planning window, the stores will pass those costs on to consumers in November. The sale signs may still be prominent, but the underlying base price will have shifted upward. Navigating this requires a sharp eye for value, comparing unit prices, and considering store brands for basic staples. 9. The premium on peak season fruit. Fresh fruit prices can appear deceptively stable, but as November arrives, a convergence of seasonal shifts, import reliance, and logistical challenges will likely make many of your favorite fruits more expensive. One of the primary factors is the natural rhythm of seasonality. As colder weather sets in across many U.S. growing regions, domestic production slows, and grocery stores become more dependent on imports to keep their produce sections stocked. This transition from local or regional farms to complex international supply chains inherently adds cost. The expenses associated with long-distance shipping, specialized storage, and managing the risk of delays all get factored into the sticker price you see at the store. This is why fruit can suddenly feel more expensive just as you start planning for holiday baking and festive fruit bowls. Citrus provides a clear illustration of this dynamic. Florida's orange and grapefruit groves are still in a multi-year recovery from the combined effects of disease and storm damage. With a smaller domestic crop, the U.S. market becomes more reliant on imports and is therefore more sensitive to any supply chain disruptions, adding upward pressure to the price of both fresh citrus and orange juice. Even fruits that seem abundant in the fall, like apples, are not immune to these pressures. While Washington state remains a powerhouse of apple production, the specific mix of varieties harvested can shape market prices. If consumer demand for a particular type of apple outstrips its supply, retailers will pay more to keep it in stock. By November, the costs of long-term storage in controlled atmosphere rooms and the freight to distribute the apples nationwide become a larger portion of the final price, causing a gradual increase even after a strong harvest. Tropical and out-of-season fruits carry their own set of risks. Bananas, avocados, mangoes, and berries are heavily dependent on imports from Mexico and Central and South America. As import volumes increase to meet winter demand, any delay at border crossings or shipping ports can quickly translate into higher wholesale prices. Factors like longer ocean routes, congestion at key canals, and fluctuating fuel costs all increase the landed cost of each container of fruit. If a shipment is delayed, retailers may have to purchase expensive spot loads to prevent empty shelves, passing that premium on to shoppers. Overarching all these factors is the weather. Global weather patterns like La Niña can alter rainfall and temperature in key fruit-growing regions around the world. These changes can reduce yields, shift harvest times, or impact the quality of the fruit. In a globally connected market, even small disruptions in one region can have a ripple effect. When you add all these pieces together, it becomes clear that November is a month where imported and out-of-season fruits are most likely to see significant price increases. Meanwhile, domestically grown fruits that have been in storage will also see modest price hikes as storage and freight costs accumulate. Planning ahead and being flexible with your fruit choices can help you manage your grocery bill during this expensive season. 10. Navigating the turbulent waters of seafood prices. Seafood prices are expected to rise in November, a trend driven by the classic economic pressure of tightening supply meeting a surge in holiday demand. Much of the fish and shellfish available in U.S. supermarkets arrives via long and complex supply chains that are sensitive to fishing seasons, shipping efficiency, and the availability of cold storage. When any part of this intricate system experiences a slowdown or a cost increase, the effects are passed down to the retail price. This is often first observed in premium items like salmon and crab, but eventually impacts everyday staples like shrimp and whitefish. November, A month when many families plan special occasion meals puts additional strain on a market that is already stretched thin. Several specific supply-side stories are contributing to this year's price pressure. In Alaska, while some crab fisheries have reopened after previous closures, the allowable catch volumes remain below historical norms. This means that while crab is available, the supply is not abundant enough to bring prices down significantly. Instead, they remain firm. The market for salmon, another holiday favorite, has also been tight in key exporting regions, leading to higher wholesale prices throughout the fall. Shrimp, which is the most consumed seafood in the U.S. by volume, is facing its own set of challenges, including trade friction and stricter screening protocols on imports. When new duties are imposed or inspections slow down the flow of product, U.S. buyers must pay more to secure their inventory. These increased costs are reflected in the price of frozen shrimp in the freezer aisle and the offerings at the fresh seafood counter, where deep discounts may be less frequent.